if you name something AI SRE, right? So does that mean I can now do something different? So that thing is now responsible for like performance management or observability or incident management.
Right.
Is that what's happening? Like we're giving the responsibility to a tool or the capability or a platform? I don't think that's what's happening, but that's what's being suggested here.
Welcome to the Reliability Rebels podcast, where we improve production by challenging the status quo. Your host, Amin Astani from Cherto Modo.
Check one, check two.
Reliability Rebels.
Check one, check two.
Reliability Rebels.
Check, 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 check.
Reliability Rebels.
Welcome to the Reliability Rebels podcast, where we explore how to make software and systems more reliable by challenging the status quo. I'm your host, Amin Astani. What's in a name? A rose by any other name would smell as sweet. That might be true in matters of love, as Shakespeare argued in Romeo and Juliet, but in technology, names carry weight, shaping how we perceive tools, processes, and products. So let's take a recent example. AI SRE, typically used to describe AI-driven automation of incident triage, coordination, and response. But what if you didn't know that and you saw vendors selling AI SRE? What would you think? Does it mean that SREs only do incident response? Or worse, that the entire discipline can be automated away by AI? Of course, both are totally inaccurate, but only an SRE would really know that. So today, we're going to dig into how the naming of such tools shapes our perceptions, including the unintended consequences that can follow and perhaps ways to avoid such outcomes. To explore this, joined by Sebastian Vietz, Director of Reliability Engineering at Compass Digital, co-host of the Reliability Enablers podcast. We crossed paths on the socials these past couple of years, and since this topic has caught both our attentions, I expect a rather lively conversation. Sebastian, good to have you.
Thank you, Alan. Nice to be here. I think I always wanted to do something together with you and not just like going back and forth on different topics on LinkedIn. So it's really nice that we finally found the time and the topic to actually go at it together. And, you know, podcasting is one of my favorite formats. So yeah, two good things come together here. So I look forward to this conversation.
Yes, sir. Super excited. All right. Well, before we get into this pretty meaty topic, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So for everybody that does not know me, like Amin suggested, I'm today a reliability engineering director for Compass Digital. Right now, work in hospitality technology. So for everybody that does not know what that means, it's basically business hospitality. So my company supplies technology and hospitality solutions to large business and enterprise customers. I cannot say any specific customers, but if you look down the Forbes 100 list, 99 of them are our customers. So imagine their offices or their office campuses, the office locations. They want to provide food service in some way, shape, or form to their employees, right, to their staff. And that's what Compass Digital, the Compass Group, the holding company above Compass Digital, that's what we do. We provide those types of hospitality service. And the way I usually describe it, we do everything from a vending machine to fine dining and anything in between, right? Think of large cafeterias, right, with multiple stations in the office that you might be working in. It would not be unlikely that one part of the Compass Group is actually facilitating that hospitality location, right? So beyond that, I'm an avid SRE advocate. I've been in the discipline now just over 9 years. Specifically, before I led software engineering teams building online banking, mobile banking products, did a lot of process automation work with different engineering teams. And more by accident than anything, fell into the SRE discipline. Probably not to dissimilar to like some of you that might be listening to us. Like, here's the book, go and do SRE, right? Sort of cold plunge into the deep end, and now you go and do that. And I did not like that introduction. And I was at a sort of a moment in time, sort of 2 years in, where I said, I either going to hate this or I'm just going to commit my life to it. And I chose the latter. So that's why I've been writing about it, podcasting about it, committed my professional life to it. And so now I'm in love. I'm very passionate about it. And yeah, so again, looking forward to this conversation. So why don't we jump right in?
Awesome. Yeah, really appreciate the intro and the background. It seems pretty interesting that a good number of us that get into SRE, it's usually in response to some kind of pain or some kind of crisis. I definitely was no exception, right? Like on-call pain, getting paged once every 10 minutes on average, something had to change, SRE book arrived, read it, jumped into it. So it sounds like you had probably not as dramatic, but a similar experience then.
Yeah, I mean, the introduction and why it actually happened was literally like major incidents left, right, and center. And I think the organization that I was working for at the time realized we needed something very different to what the organization at the time was traditionally trying in order to get a handle on those major incidents. And, the idea was born, why don't we look to Google and to the book they just published and try something like that, right? It was nothing close to it, but it sort of sparked the idea, and it ended up introducing me to reliability engineering and whatever. Haven't really looked back ever since.
Yeah, fair enough. Same. Okay. Same genesis, origin story, if you will. Very good. All right, then. Well, let's just rip off the Band-Aid, shall we? So you and we both started to see posts on LinkedIn in particular about this concept of AI SRE. And to start with that, let's explore what our reactions were, starting with you. I think in our intro call, you mentioned that you were pissed. Tell me a little bit about that, right?
Yeah, I don't know why this one particularly hit me so hard. I mean, I've been in technology for over 2 decades now, and I've seen all kinds of shiny objects, terms that, people are using to marketing their products. So
Yeah.
I suppose that hype cycle around AI and then layer it in to the already existing confusion around SRE, who we are, what we do, who we are not, what we're not doing. I never sort of liked sort of the simplification of the discipline and sort of the very specific angle certain people have towards SRE, all the while you and I know it's a fairly deep and fairly wide discipline that can go into all kinds of places and problem spaces to help out and ultimately, make things better for engineering teams, make things better for the businesses that we are supporting, right? So I think it was a bit of both. AI hype cycle, sort of the misinterpretation of SRE and what it is and what it isn't, and then bring both of these together. And I just had it in that moment, right? I just thought, this is so ambiguous. It is misleading. It is inaccurate, right? It's sort of almost like a little bit diminishing, and not that I ever had sort of this guttural feel that I was afraid that AI SRE in whatever shape or form people are marketing it right now would ever replace me or my team. Yeah. I don't think that is going to happen anytime soon. But I know from the people that I work with, the teams that I have been leading today, when they're seeing something like this, right, they don't necessarily always look at this so nuanced, right? They do have these concerns that when somebody proclaims here, this thing is going to replace my job, my role, what is that going to do to me as a professional, right? So it ends up creating all kinds of weird conversations and conversations where I want to misspell or need to misspell some of those things that AI SRE actually isn't, right? So
Yes.
it's a lot of time spent where I honestly say, I don't want to spend my time there. There's no value to be found. We make no impact there by having these types of conversations, right? So that's a bit of the origin as to why that rubbed me the wrong way.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I relate quite a bit to that, particularly around the reductive tone that teams already and companies already have around the term SRE, completely divorced from the concept of AI. Like if you go on the SRE subreddit, for example, you'll see endless professionals that signed up for an SRE role and their day-to-day actual job scope is on-call incident response firefighting. And it's happened for so long that there is this just general acceptance that, oh yeah, SRE role, it means you're on call, it means you're in the trenches. But again, you and I both know that is not what that is. Like, yes, on call and incident response, that's and observability, that's the bottom of Mikey Dickerson's reliability pyramid, right? But there is also, release processes and change management and capacity planning all the way to the top, which is product, like actually enabling product to win. But yeah, you throw AI in there and you say, oh, I'm automating this. Yeah, it definitely sent me a little bit over the top as well. So right there with you on that.
For me,
Yeah.
always known about this pyramid. It gets referenced quite a bit. And over the years, I actually moved away from it because
Ooh.
I didn't, and we can have another podcast episode about that, but
Yeah.
I moved away from that pyramid model and turned it into various pillars of SRE that I call it, right? And it's almost like another type of symbolism where I'm just saying it's so much broader and pillars are supportive. They're supportive structures, right? And what you're potentially building on top of pillars, especially larger pillars, they're being used in large scale construction, to build large scale buildings. That's what pillars are used for. And the building is held up ultimately by these pillars. And if you don't do these pillars well, guess what happens with the building? Might be a little bit wonky, might be not as safe as people would want it to be, might not be, as the name suggests, reliable as the engineer said it would, or it was supposed to be. So I moved away from that and went to that like more pillar picture to allow for more room for the practice that I, if you will, preach wherever I go, wherever I build teams, because I don't want to be limited by
Yeah.
like certain people or certain terminologies or certain confines. I just want to go to places that have actual problem spaces that I can help with my team solve, right? Or they have challenges that we can help overcome, or there are actual opportunities for engineering to support the business in a very different way. So that's why I always talk about problems, challenges, and opportunities, and whatever that means in the context of a given organization. Sometimes a lot of my work is very cultural in nature, right?
Oh, yeah.
So we, again, another episode for that, right? Sort of the cultural type aspects of SRE and how we influence culture due to the work that we do, right? So to be sort of limited to just incident management
Right.
is sad, right? I'm actually very far away from having any of my teams play that role because I want to empower the teams that we support to do incident management well. That's sort of how I interpret it. I'm not the person with my team to take it on your behalf. I'll teach you and I educate you how to do it well, right? So part of my current role, I've been spending the last 3 years on continuous education around incident management, right? But my team is almost like third level, last line of defense when all else fails type scenario, right? And
Yes.
you're not primary responders. So that's just sort of another angle that I'm coming from, where my interpretation of SRE is so much like wider and broader. I want to give it breathing room, that we're not so confined towards a specific definition, right? Because every institution, every organization, every company I've ever gone into and worked for was different, right? And what
Course.
they
Oh, yeah.
needed was different. So again, more episodes to come.
Oh, apparently, yeah. No, 100%. This all makes sense to me. I mean, in my consulting practice, I'm not on call. I am providing guidance and education on how to do incident response, being that I've had the experience, I've done it for a long time, and I know when it looks good and I know when it isn't. So yeah, I'm very much in alignment with you. SREs don't necessarily have to be on call. I see a lot of teams where that interpretation, I call it an engagement model, that the engagement model calls for on call, but not always, depending on the organizational need, to your point. Okay, so this whole AI SRE concept, naming things this way, there is a personal reason as well for you as to why this can potentially rub you the wrong way, because you experience the effects of this type of misnaming personally, not necessarily AI SRE, but other products with various features and using different terms and words inaccurately. So without getting into too much detail, mind sharing the types of things you had to deal with at your job professionally due to a product or a service or a team being named or described in an inaccurate way?
Yep. And I think, and I'm about to actually write another article about this very topic, right? And
Oh,
one thing
wow.
that comes to mind for me immediately is when we leverage technology terms,
Hmm.
say like platform, right? Or API, or operating system, or something of that nature, right? Everybody in technology has a certain interpretation of that term, association of that term, explanation for that term, right?
Yes.
Um, but what comes along with these terms are also certain expectations as to what this thing is and what it does.
Right.
Right? So if you take, for example, the word platform, right,
Hmm.
and you name something like a product and add platform to it, immediately people will ask you, okay, what's the makeup of the platform? What's the security posture of the platform? What are the different services and capabilities of the platform? Who are the users? Et cetera, et
Exactly.
cetera. It's a laundry list of questions. And when you are in a business of either selling and technology products or buying them, like in the position that I am in, right? I have to go through like a vendor evaluation process, or I have to go through a customer type audit, because I'm using these products in order to build other technology products that I'm then offering to customers of mine, of my company,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
So, and it is not uncommon for service providing companies like mine to then be audited by their customers as part of the contract signing process, right? They want to know what they're
Yes.
getting into, right? They want to know, are they exposed in any way, shape, or form, especially if you integrate with their technology too, um, right? Which oftentimes happen in our case. So we're undergoing these audits, right? And then
Yes.
incorrect terminology and names are popping up all over these audit reviews, right? So, and I found myself in a lot of them in the last couple of years where I thought, why am I spending so much time explaining to everybody what this thing is not? Because it was just misnamed, mislabeled, and it's misleading, right? So I spent more time in, say, for example, the process of auditing than I potentially should have or needed to, just to put people at ease and telling them it's not this. It's technically just a website, right? It's technically just a mobile app. It's technically just a service endpoint. right? It's none of these other things that we happen to have to disclose to you because we named them like that. But it's not technically what those things are, right? And that's kind of where that was my second angle to this. I keep seeing people using terms that have already certain types of associations and definitions and expectations, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a misuse for me of this term, right? And it
Yes.
ultimately has business impact because let's be honest, me involving my team and a bunch of other stakeholders in an audit process is expensive, right? We are basically spending a whole lot of time going through this and spending more time on it than we technically should if we would have been just more clear on the things that we're actually integrating with our customers, right? But we ended up spending 70, 80% more time on that audit because we had to explain so much what the things are not and what they cannot do and the security risk that doesn't exist. Right. So you spend so much more valuable business time that with my team specifically, I could have used in a bunch of different other creators and helpful ways than spending in meetings, explaining to auditors and third party what the thing isn't, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like sales and marketing says one thing, and you're just going behind them cleaning up the mess that is left in their wake by leading off with an inaccurate statement as to what the thing is.
And to add to this, if I may, right, and not to, for my organization, not to say that this is just an organizational issue, right? What actually came from that was wonderful conversations around how careful we need to be
Yes.
organizationally when we term certain things in a certain way for the purposes of selling, for the purposes
Yes.
of marketing, for the purposes of internal and external auditors, right? For the purposes of internal and external certifications that we try to acquire, right? Because it's
Right.
business, from a business perspective, it's beneficial, right? What if you want to get SOX certified? You're going through the same hell again, right? Because you're explaining to these SOC auditors what this thing is not, more than what you should be explaining to the auditor, what this thing actually is and what it does, you know, and there is no risk and there's no security exposure. And you don't have to worry about the data as much as you would if you were to call this thing an operating system,
Right.
right? So that was sort of the other angle. So internally, we had a great conversation following some of those unfortunate naming conventions, right?
Sure.
And I think ultimately I ended up providing a list to our marketing team, I think, 20 technology terms. Please do not use them, right? Or if you're planning on using them, let's have a conversation first about the implications of it, right? So trying to just have people sort of be aware and realize that naming something has real business implications, right? It has
Yes.
a real cost to them, right? So that was almost my second angle in which I arrived at this AI SRE topic. You know, I was
Mm-hmm.
sort of back of my neck. I just dealt with this. I just had long-standing conversations about this, and now this shows up, and just I'm pre-charged, you know. So
Yeah.
this
You're
is
primed
not this
for
is
it.
coming at the most unopportune time, you know. Don't want to talk about it anymore.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And that's valid. So in a past life, in a past job, I have seen customers for a past product for a certain open source CMS. I have seen customers lay off their entire development team because they
Wow.
think that the platform, quote unquote, the platform is going to do the thing that the development team previously did. They actually pulled the trigger and laid off an entire team only for them to have to attempt to claw back their staff because of a massive misconception around the capabilities of their product. So I very much want to mirror what you're saying, that this is real. There are real effects around naming things, especially when it comes to business decisions and those connotations
Yep.
of technical words when you're signing a contract or, getting SOC 2, as you mentioned.
Naming them and then doubling down on them and selling them as something that they're not.
Yes.
Right? So you're overselling there something, and some of the sales folks, great sales folks, they're really good at their job, right? So
Oh, yeah.
they'll sell you anything, right?
Of course.
They sell you the t-shirt on your back, right? As they say, right? So they are that good, right? But then if you have I don't know, innocent audience or perceptive audience, right, that sort of listens to that and eats that all up and then makes consequential decisions based on that. And then when reality hits the floor, the platform or the tool or the capability gets rolled out, and then all of a sudden everybody is disappointed with, oh, it's just this tiny little thing. It's not really the thing that allows us to lay off an entire development team, for example, like you suggested, right?
Yes.
Like it cannot fulfill this role of a development team. It absolutely can't. It never could. But the way it was sold, right? It was positioned that way. And yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of naivete there, potentially there, so to blame as well. But
Yes.
again, some sales folks are that good, right? And they're selling, right? They're making it sound super appealing. The presentations are super shiny and spotless. The logical flow in which they're explaining things makes total sense, right? As has all the right keywords and key phrases and trigger things that are sounding good to decision makers and executives, right? And then reality strikes, and it's 10%, 15% of all those promises that might be true. The reality is very different, right?
Yeah, it becomes a customer success issue. It makes it through sales, but then it becomes a customer success issue. 100%. So a little bit of background for the listeners. So this episode came from simultaneously things that Sebastian was working on, which we'll mention in a little bit, as well as a post that I wrote very briefly on LinkedIn. It was just me saying, why are we calling this thing AISRE? And, discussing what we've been talking about for the past 20 minutes here. We got some really interesting responses in the discussion from C-level executives, from tech companies, particularly the companies that are using AISRE as a term. So we were able to get their take. So I have a few here that I'll mention, and we can explore this and maybe consider the implications of them. But here are some examples. Honestly, because it's what people search for and what the market is establishing as a known category for these types of products. So that's one explanation why AISRE is in use. Another one, it's more expensive to change people's minds than it is to go with the flow. It's another. And then number three, which really hit me in the gut, and I'm sure that this will turn into a big a big tirade between the two of us. Once Gartner puts it into a report, it will be solidified into history. So basically, the argument that they're stating, and now I'm saying, yeah, it's valid, but it still creates these knock-on effects. Companies use it because it's what sells.
Yep.
Right?
Yep, 100%. My first gut reaction when I first read some of those in the various subreddits and LinkedIn and wherever some of those even comments were made previously when these AI SREs were introduced, right? For me, I couldn't help myself. My first gut reaction was, that's lazy, right? It's you couldn't come up with something better. Right? You have marketing teams, you have potentially done some research, right? The second guttural reaction that I had to it, right, was at some point, I believe that when I work for vendors, that we're trying to differentiate our product offerings from one another.
Yes.
So how is that now going to take place when we're all calling something AI SRE, for example, right?
Yes.
But then what's happening behind that term is from company to company potentially very, very different,
Oh
right?
yeah.
One company goes to mean by that there's some automation happening in their tool or platform. Some company has that to mean it's about incident management improvement, right? Improving the life of incident responders. Some other company talks about it in the context of infrastructure observability, right? So you get to this entire spectrum of vendors and companies,
Mhm.
and then they all use the same term, and it means 50 different things depending on which direction you look and which vendor brand you're looking at, right?
Yes.
First part of the confusion, right? Like, then I just want to say either be consistent as to what it means and what it doesn't, right? Or be more creative and talk more about your specific use case, about the thing that you do well and that you are going to um, support SREs. If that's your target audience, right? Talk about how you're going to help them do their job better, faster,
Yes.
more efficiently, talk about that, and find a term that fits that really, really well. Differentiate yourself from everybody else. You could be the first one through the door. You don't have to go to Forrester and Gartner, that, my opinion of some of those research and marketing groups and companies a little bit
Yes.
anyway, where they're putting these things out there because they have to produce a marketing research report or a survey of sorts, right? And then I find it, I mean, yes, you can do it that way, right? And I appreciate the stance that some people take. It's sort of, it's easy, right? It's what
Right.
people recognize.
Hmm.
But come on, like I want to say we are better than this, right? You want to support the SRE community and the SRE discipline. You actually saying you're part of it, and some vendors will absolutely say that, right? And they absolutely are, right? They do
Hmm.
some amazing work. Some of their people contribute greatly to the community, to the open source community that supports the SRE community. On top of that, right?
Yes.
So come on, I have higher expectations, I want to say, of our community and of the craft. You can do better than that. I just want to say, this is so infuriating. We're not that, trivial.
Yeah. Righteous indignation. I love it. I love that. And it's true. We are a community of very, very smart people. We've solved many different types of problems under high pressure. And we've taken part in building the 21st century. One thing that you brought up that I think is worth mentioning is, okay, marketing, the act of communicating, hey, you have a problem, we have something that can solve this problem. I think maybe if we did a root cause analysis in a way here, is around the audience that marketing is talking to, because they have to talk to typically the people with the purse strings.
True.
And what typically happens, the SREs, maybe even the VP of engineering is not the one with the purse strings. So that means they have to speak to an audience that might not have ever been on call before, that might not have ever built a dashboard, might not have ever fired up, GDB or looked over a stack trace or run a system call tracer. They might have never done any of those things before, but they have to sell to them.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm not dismissing marketing or sales, right? These are
Of course
tough
not.
jobs. I know I couldn't do either one of them. I would be very, very useless, right? And to what you're saying there, yeah, absolutely. Probably the wrong audience, right?
Yeah.
I wish there would be some form of involvement of the people that ultimately have to use it, right? Or
Yes.
get replaced by it, or should be assessing it, whatever, however you do this, you do a POC or something like that, right? if your internal process as a purchasing company of software, right, your process needs to be better than that, right?
Indeed.
Because you're setting yourself up for failure. So on that side, I want to say, yeah, tough job for the marketers and tough job for the sales folks of all those vendor companies to have to sell to that crowd. And really, the balance that they then need to strike at that point is, how do I sell something very technical to you, to a very non-technical audience, right? Which we
Yes.
both know is some of the hardest thing as a skill to learn as a technologist, for example,
Oh, yeah.
right? To do that translation between this is our platform, or this is our automation tool, and now turn that into, oh, this contributes to your operational efficiency efforts, right? Or that increases your revenue, or you will be able to meet some of your efficiency targets. You can be more with basically the same amount of people because the way they
Right.
can work is more effective, right? And that sort of translation is not easy, right? There's not a lot of people that I know that do this fluently and really, really well. I mean, at times I struggle with this. Um,
Yes.
so I get the job is hard,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Um, but I also wrote in the past about sort of good sort of vendor purchaser relationships, right? Where you are really forthcoming, you are really honest about the thing that you're selling, what it's good at, really highlight that, but also be honest about what it doesn't do, even if it doesn't do it just yet. Don't overpromise and underdeliver, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because ultimately, long term, past marketing, past sales, now you said earlier, it becomes a customer success issue. It absolutely does, right?
Yes.
You're never going to work with this company again because they're going to be so upset with you because what you sold to them, what you promised to them, didn't materialize, and they couldn't realize on all the promises that you have made. That's the first and last time we've ever sold anything to that company. I promise you that. Right? So, what are you interested in? Like a long-term strategic partnership and engagement, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
a quick short-term sell, right? And I know it's not that black and white either. I get all
Yeah.
that, but ultimately, I think if your company is supposed to have any type of legs or longevity, please aim for that honest partnership. Even be proactive and say, if you realize that if you have a business audience in front of you, suggest something like, can we invite one of your technical stakeholders, technical people to the conversations, right? To be very sure that we are on the same page here. I'm not selling you something that you ultimately end up regretting, right?
Right.
And so I know this is a little bit idealistic, right? But I love the partners that I have that do act like that, right? And I really despise the ones that cannot go past the marketing or sales pitch. And ultimately, if I already have to indulge those partners, they're not going to be my partners for long, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or if they're trying to become partners of mine, they're never going to be, right?
Yeah. No, I respect that. I think excellence comes from a certain measure of idealism where you're saying, I want to reach this level of communication, this level of clarity, this level of being deliberate and intentional. I think that's just the recipe for
Yep.
to what you're alluding to, good relationships between businesses.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we've explored how this has and can go wrong. Taking tools and technology, giving them a catchy name for the sake of marketing and sales, but misrepresenting what it actually is. Now, in response to this, you have spent some time and some pretty deep thought, and you recently have announced a framework, right, to help address this issue and give some resources and food for thought for people to perhaps choose more thoughtful descriptors for the things that they're building and selling. Mind introducing that to our listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's actually quite interesting how it came to be. And let me give everybody a little bit of a backstory. So the framework that I developed is called Sabro, and I'll explain in a second what that name means. It's actually an acronym. But before we get to Sabro, I had a moment, and I was writing about this moment on LinkedIn where I was, I think, at the peak of my frustration with AI SRE, and I just
Yes.
had to vent a little bit. And I think your thread that you started was not too dissimilar. Like it was a little bit of a frustration that could be felt throughout it, right? And I had the same. That's why we, I think, ultimately came together, right?
Yes.
But then some of the comments that were made were insightful, right? They were helpful. And there was also a comment from a gentleman that I value these days very much, Andrew Malaband, right? That said, all right, you complained about it. Do you have any proposal or suggestion on how to do this better? So sort of almost putting out a challenge, right? And
Oh,
I
yeah.
thought, he talks like I talk all the time, like don't just complain and whine about it, but also come prepared to be part of the solution. And I
Correct.
thought, that's a mirror in front of my face. Okay, let's look at this. I said to him, all right, I need to step away from this for a second because I'm still too charged, right? Week later, I start to sit down. I have some time. I want to write down all the examples of better words, right? Better marketing terms and better sales terms that one could use. And while I was going through it, I'm coming up sort of with that thought process. This is how I would go about thinking about naming something responsibly, so that it can be shared and framed and understood better, right?
Yes.
And the more I thought about the examples that I wanted to provide in response to Andrew's challenge, right, I realized, maybe it's not about the examples that I give. Maybe it's more about the thought process that I'm currently going through. And so I paused, I pivoted, and I said, okay, let me maybe put that in writing and put that in an article and share with people how I think about responsible naming and framing of terms. And that's what ended up culminating in the Sabro framework, right? So Sabro is, like I said, an acronym. And before I say to everybody what the individual letters actually stand for, what I try to get across with the framework, and it's for free, everybody can use it, please do so. And it's especially sort of targeted at the people we critiqued a little bit, vendors, research companies, consulting companies, marketers, salespeople, right? Give them a helpful tool to potentially come up with something better than just AI SRE, right? So the first thing that was important to me was to recognize SRE as a discipline, what we already touched on, right?
Oh, yeah.
It has more breadth than what a lot of people make it out to be or what they think is behind SRE. It's not just incident management. It's so much bigger, right? I wanted to also instill, as part of the framework, to not misuse some of the technical terms that we talked about that are prolific across SRE, like the things that we hear, SLIs, SLOs, SLAs, MTTD, like all the different types of metric names, right? All the different technologies that we are potentially exposed to, like I said earlier, platforms, operating systems, APIs, you name it. Like, don't misappropriate them because that just creates confusion. And again, as I said earlier, it creates business impact because now people spend more time explaining what it isn't than talking about what it can do for us, how it can help us. Right? So that's sort of the second premise behind it. So I wanted with the framework then ultimately to prevent confusion around accountability, right? Because if you name something AISRE, right? So does that mean I can now do something different? So that thing is now responsible for like performance management or observability or incident management?
Right.
Is that what's happening? Like we're giving the responsibility to a tool or a capability or a platform? I don't think that's what's happening, but that's what's being suggested here, right?
Yes.
A couple others quickly. I wanted to, because I'm passionate about SRE, the discipline, and in the community, I wanted to just protect the credibility of the field and the discipline,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Should really not just minimize what SRE does, what SRE practitioners are doing, and what they have done over the past 10 years in the global community after sort of it emerged from Google, right? I
Yes.
don't want this to be minimized, right? I just dislike that very much. So when that happens, when anybody does that. So it's ultimately that Sabro framework is for guiding people to name and frame things more responsibly, right?
Mhm.
And so if you give me maybe 2 more minutes, I'll tell everybody what Sabro stands for. S stands for specialization. Specialization, what do I mean by that? Borrow the credibility of some established professions, right? For example, general roles, right? Like researchers or detectives or counselors, right? Use them, use them as sort of metaphors of what you're trying to describe with the name that you're trying to coin, right? So use some of those specialized professions that have some credibility to them, that we have an idea of what they're good at. Investigators, it says in the name, they're good at investigating, figuring things out, right? You know, counselors, they're good at consulting and good at listening. They're good at, going back and forth with you, figuring out if there's anything wrong, and if there is, maybe help you, guide you, and show you a path, right? So that's kind of what I mean by use some of those specializations, some of those professional roles that are out there across various industries that might be helpful to inform what the thing is that you're trying to describe.
Mm-hmm.
The A in Sabro stands for augmentation. So super important. What I don't want it for any name that you choose to insinuate that it's going to replace you, Amin, or me, or anyone on our teams, right? It's not a replacement. We're not even close to a real world SRE scenario where you can literally say, this piece of tech, however complex it might be, however informed or supported by AI it might be, it cannot do my job today. It will not do my job probably for another few years, right? So choose a name that sort of suggests that you're augmenting the SRE practitioner, right? Be in support of that practitioner or that SRE team, as opposed to a replacement, right? It's sort of what it could stand for right now. B are boundaries. Be very clear as part of what you're naming to say, this is what it can do, what it's good at, and also tell people what it doesn't do. Don't pretend that it's this almighty tool that does everything under the sun if it's really ultimately good at, incident triage, for example, right? Or does some anomaly detection in the observability space. This is really at the core of it. This is what it's really good at. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't do, automated recovery of sorts, so you might suggest that, but just don't, just say, this is what it's good at, and here are the boundaries currently. It also gives you runway with your partners to say, we are still working on improving this product, right? There's more runway, and we have other capabilities in sort of our mind that we want to develop over time. We're just not quite there yet. Just be, again, honest, right? Respect, I already touched on. That's the R in Sabro, right? So basically use the SRE concepts and terminologies responsibly, right? Don't, for example, and you know this, I know you do workshops around SLOs, right? Be very clear when you use a service level indicator, when you use a service level objective term, or what is the difference between those two, and when you're saying service level agreement, right? Or when you're setting service level expectations, right? So do some of the research. Come on, right? Don't be lazy, Be sure to know what you're talking about. Maybe connect with one of the SRE practitioners that can help you if you're unsure, right? That would probably be a better path.
Mm-hmm.
And then the final letter in Sabro is O, is outcomes, right? So name outcomes and measurable impact, right? What does this thing that you want to name actually end up creating in terms of outcomes, right? Is it faster detection? Is it the reduction of toil? Is it providing capabilities to release changes more safely? Ultimately, outcomes is what matters. Outcomes is what you can sell to. You can sell to business stakeholders, right? You don't even have to become technical at that point. You sell outcomes. If you can talk about delivering changes into production more safely, that is something a business person can understand, right? You don't have to massage it any more than that. That's pretty straightforward, right? Because if you don't, you have interruption in production, your business operation is interrupted, your customers get upset, you might get legal challenges, right? You have reputational damages, all those good things. If you talk about outcomes, the business stakeholders, that might be the only stakeholders you ever get to talk to, during the negotiation phase, during the selling phase, they're going to listen, right? They're going to understand your language. So that's Sabro, right?
Yeah. Huge. Huge. A few things jumped in mind as you were describing your framework on how to more accurately describe the things that we're building and trying to sell. Boundaries is huge. And the thing about it is, I don't know what happened to the Unix philosophy over the past 10, 20 years, but I think it's really important that when we're building tools, we are talking about we're doing one thing and we're doing it well, right?
Yes.
And there are features of a particular suite of products that each of them, they accomplish a specific task. That makes a whole lot of sense to me, and ties right in with outcomes because, well, the bounds of the problem you're trying to solve is going to help you accomplish it. And then to augmentation, it's so funny because I was talking about this again with Chris Evans in the last episode around the appropriate role of automation, completely divorced from AI, right? Which is this idea called the compensatory principle of automation, as opposed to the leftover principle of automation. So I'll briefly review this because I think it's really important. So the leftover principle of automation is I am going to automate away a task. And I'm going to write code to do this task. And then I'm going to leave all of the really hard stuff I couldn't automate for the humans to do.
Right.
And that really stinks. That's not a good outcome. It's painful on the engineers. It's not wieldy on the software. Whereas when you're talking about augmentation, that is a compensatory principle. So we are saying, listen, there are tasks that are really good for computers to do. And then there are things that are really good for humans to do. And humans are guiding, the discussion and the interaction between themselves and the machines. Like a Toyota production system automation is another example of that, where there is a division of labor between machine and humans, but humans are driving the process.
Right.
Right. Because they're ultimately accountable. Right. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that, yeah, this framework is well thought out and is grounded in engineering principles that go back 30, 40 years now.
Yeah, which I also like as part of the sort of, I think it came about accidentally more than anything. And you giving some great examples, right? I didn't think about any of the things that you just said, but it's so nice to see, right? That it fits into other trains of thoughts also, right? And like you suggested, some of those are ancient, right? They're from the industrial age, right? But
Yeah.
good principles are just that, good principles. They have some longevity to them, right? They don't change just because we're now in the AI age, right? I'm finding myself in so many different situations where I think back, even today, when we talk about AI this and AI that all the time, and I feel like I've heard this like 25 years ago. No no question, like 100%. That principle, that approach has not changed. Like
Nope.
at its core, right? It has a bit more layers of abstraction. It got a little bit more complicated on the surface, but at its core, it's still the same thing that I learned, whatever, 25 years ago in university, right? Like that's how good some of that like hardcore research, that sort of fundamental work that some people have done that came before us have done, they still stand strong today, right? So
Oh yeah.
it's nice to see that some of the thoughts that I had or that you have or that Chris has are sort of grounded in that. And I feel like this is so much that feels so much more natural. It feels so much better to come from that place as opposed to being at that superficial um Dunning-Kruger place type deal, like
Yeah.
it's not very deep. It's not very thought out, right? So,
Mhm.
and I know we're living in a fast-paced world, right?
Yes.
Everything needs to be done tomorrow or yesterday, right? But there is some value, especially in our space, when you
Mhm.
think about it, and I've talked about this so much just in the last few weeks,
Oh yeah.
stop, think, pause, research, right? Go back to the basics, to the fundamentals, because your constant running, your constant sprinting, your constant sort of endeavor to deliver really, really fast without any thought whatsoever, any planning, it's just biting us time and time again. And I can sit there and I can say all these things and I can tell you that ship is going to hit that iceberg. And sometimes I get frustrated because people can either they can't hear it or I'm not saying it the right way. I don't know if I'm articulating it sometimes the wrong way, but it's just like back to those fundamentals is just beautiful when we have conversations like that because
Yeah.
it's so much more grounded, right? And it's like it's grounded also in realism. Like ultimately, what we build needs to be supported, it needs to be operated, it needs to function, and not just for tomorrow. Hope most people probably have the aspiration that what we build lasts a few years, right? So, but we're not building for that, right?
Right.
So
Yeah. Yeah. Reminds me of a catchphrase, a slogan that Meta had printed on posters in their office. One of the things that company did a lot was internal propaganda of sorts. And they had a picture of a rocking horse with the words, "Do not confuse activity for progress."
oh yeah, I've used that one before. I like that one so
Right?
much. Yes,
Because
that's
you
exactly
can
it.
look busy, but you're not getting anything done. And that's where the engineering discipline comes in. Are we in fact doing things that are measurable and moving the needle forward and creating those business outcomes? So to tie a bow on this before we wrap up, using the Sabro method, do you have like your favorite examples? I know that the idea behind it is to use the framework to create the descriptive words, but it might be good to give listeners a concrete example of maybe a few ways to use it to describe a particular example tool. Do you have anything like that?
Yeah, I do. And so, as part of the article, that if you want to share that, please do so, right?
I will.
There is a section, it's section 5 to be precise, responsible naming archetypes, I call them. It's kind of a starter library. It gives you some food for thought, something to
Yeah.
start with. You may not like any of them, but it sort of gets the idea of across of what that would look like if you applied the Sabro framework to different things we do in SRE. So to give
Yes.
you just rundown for our listeners, right? Observability, incident management, SLO creation, management and operation, changes and releases, capacity and performance. Those are things that we do, right? In our discipline, in our practice. So
Yes.
if you think about them and apply them for those specific areas, pyramid layers or pillars, as I call them, right?
Sure.
Then what are you getting if you're applying that framework, right? So I give some examples here in the observability space: signal deduper, anomaly ranker, context enricher, right? It tells you what it does, not
Hmm.
what it pretends to be, In incident management, maybe triage sentinel, impact estimator, chronology builder, in the capacity and performance space. Maybe it's a capacity forecaster, cost reliability mapper, latency hotspot finder. You know, even in sort of the Gen AI sort of like maybe it's another pillar that we should add to the SRE things that we cannot ignore at the very least, right? So
Perhaps. Yeah.
yeah. So root cause researcher, Runbook co-author, incident debrief counselor, again,
Great.
you might not like any of them, but they sort of give you an idea of if you apply that SABRO, these sort of that thought process, if you will, that framework, then you come out with something that is more descriptive, more to the point, right? It doesn't pretend to be something that it isn't, right? It also is more clear around where do I start and where do I end? What do I actually get from it, right? Like, how am I getting support from this tool, capacity, or function, that platform, if I'm going to incorporate that in my day-to-day as an SRE, right? What is that thing helping me with, to speak to the augmentation part, right? So
Right.
again, there's a whole section with some of those examples in there. Again, you might dislike all of them, but they're just the starter library, something to get you started to work with, and then you just do your own. And I actually made the call out as part of publishing that article to say, please, if you do use it, right, share with us how you applied it, what you came up with. Like, I'm very interested to see sort of what are the outcomes of the application of that framework might be for you. So
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for the concrete examples. They make a lot of sense. And sure, from like, a rough marketing sales perspective, it might not be super trendy, but it paints a picture in our minds as engineers as to what the heck you're talking about. And I'm understanding you when you say, those sorts of things. It kind of reminds me of the Concourse CI project. They call it the continuous thing doer, right? And that is precisely what it is. It is a mechanism that will run things all the time.
yep.
And it's that ambiguous because it can be. So yeah, this is really cool. I really appreciate you
Let me propose
walking us
one
through.
one extra thing, right?
Please do it.
Because
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
if you think about it, right? Like, I don't know if you ever thought about in your life as a technologist, as an SRE, whether or not how would you choose? Would you choose a sexy term or like a shiny object term, or would you choose a term that tells you what it does and what it is, and how it supports you? Like really think about it. If you end up talking to technologists, right? What would their value more? To understand what the thing does and how to use it, and how it supports you, or whether or not you call it something really obscure and ambiguous and created by a research company with no real SRE experience, right? Like, come to me as the one that purchases software. I go with the thing that explains to me what it does in one word or two, like any day of the week. I don't care for the shiny object or that marketing term that you're creating, because ultimately, if I assess it, I'm going to look under the hood anyway, right?
Yes.
Let's just skip that step, and just tell me what it does in the name straight up. And you and I can have a quicker, more efficient, and, more honest conversation around the thing that you're trying to bring to me, that you're trying to sell to me, that you have me use, right? Just a thought.
Just a thought. I think it's a very reasonable request to make to our sales and marketing and executive friends. Very good. So I think this is a fantastic discussion, and it looks like that we might have even revealed several more opportunities for more, much to think about in later days. But in the meantime, how can people reach you if they're interested in talking more?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm living and breathing when I'm not working on LinkedIn. That's my platform. That's where I comment, I contribute, I post my my articles. I recently and finally started up my own brand, that I wanted to sort of consolidate some of the things that I do under. It's called SRE Insights. So there's the appropriate website for that as well, sreinsights.io. And the first blog post, the first article on that website, that's where you can find the Sabro framework and find all the additional details and considerations about Sabro if you want to use it, if you want to read the article. But yeah, primarily find me on LinkedIn. I'm very responsive there. And that's how you get in touch with me.
Fantastic. Sebastian, a pleasure. I've had a lot of fun. I'm confident our listeners will have a lot of fun going over this conversation with us today.
Me too. I love this conversation. And I was already called out multiple times today because I did 2 presentations throughout the day today already. And I was called, you speak too much. You love to speak too much. And I just do, because I'm so passionate about a lot of these things that you and I discussed just in the last hour. And yeah, I hope it comes through, right? I'm genuine about these things, right? So I'm just really here to share with the community. And I had a blast. That was fantastic. It was everything I was hoping for. And so thanks for the invitation, Amin.
Of course, you're very welcome and mad respect.
Thank you for listening to today's edition of Reliability Rebels. Until next time.
Check 1, check 2.
Reliability Rebels.
Check 1, check 2.
Reliability Rebels.
Check, 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 check.
Reliability